I spent 3 days making my sister-in-law's baby shower perfect. Not perfect, like I put in some effort. Perfect, like I drove 40 minutes to 3 different grocery stores because the first 2 didn't carry the exact shade of sage green ribbon she wanted for the favor bags. Perfect, like I stayed up until 2 a.m. the night before hot gluing paper flowers to a backdrop that no one, not one single person, ended up photographing. Perfect, like I used my own credit card because my mother-in-law said she'd sort out the money stuff later, and I was too tired and too hopeful to push back. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I knew what I was doing. I'm not someone who stumbles into things. I'm a planner. Literally. Event coordination is what I do for work. I've organized corporate galas for 300 people, destination bachelorettes in Savannah, first birthday parties that cost more than some people's cars. I know exactly how much labor goes into this kind of thing. I knew the hours, I knew the cost, and I did it anyway, because I thought that was what love looked like in this family. Showing up, doing more than asked, proving yourself quietly, and waiting for someone to finally notice. My sister-in-law's name is Brooke. She's 28. She laughs loud. She gets cold easily, and she has never once in 4 years asked me how I'm doing and meant it. Not the way you actually mean it. She says it the way you say it to a cashier. Fine, fine. How are you? Fine. My mother-in-law adores her. That's not bitterness talking. It's just accurate. Brooke is the daughter she always wanted, and I'm the woman her son chose, which is a very different category. My husband, will call him what his family calls him, which is nothing warm. They use his full name always, formal, like he's perpetually in trouble. I call him by a nickname I gave him early on. He's good, he's kind. He genuinely did not see what I saw for a long time, because when you grow up inside something, you lose the ability to recognize it as strange. The shower was on a Saturday in April. 52 people. Backyard of my mother-in-law's house, which I had also helped clean the week before, on a Thursday evening after my own workday, because she mentioned offhandedly that the outdoor furniture needed wiping down and no one else was going to do it. I had made the brunch menu, ordered the florals, built the activity stations, written the games, printed the labels, and coordinated the caterer. I had also, and this is the part that still sits somewhere uncomfortable in my chest, talked Brooke down from a spiral 2 nights before the shower because she was anxious about the gender reveal portion and needed someone to talk through logistics with. I was on the phone with her for 1 hour and 40 minutes. I missed dinner. My husband ate alone and left me a plate in the microwave. The day of the shower went smoothly, which is what happens when someone who does this for a living runs it. The florals looked better than the photos. The food came out on time. The games moved quickly. Nobody had to wait for anything. Brooke cried twice. Happy tears, once when her best friend gave a toast and once when she opened the gift from her college roommate. My mother-in-law circulated the whole afternoon with her hand on Brooke's back, steering her around the yard like a proud parent at a recital. At the end, when everyone had eaten and the presents had been opened and the backdrop I'd hot glued at 2 a.m. was still standing despite the breeze, my mother-in-law gathered the remaining guests for a little speech. This is something she does. She likes a moment. She tapped her glass in the yard when quiet, and she talked about how grateful she was for everyone who came, how meaningful it was to celebrate Brooke, how much this family loves this baby already. She talked about Brooke's mom flying in from Portland and how touched they all were. She mentioned Brooke's best friend by name for bringing the custom cake. She thanked 2 cousins for helping set up chairs that morning, which took them approximately 11 minutes. She did not say my name. Not once. Not a sideways mention. Not even a vague, and of course everyone who helped put this together. Nothing. I stood at the edge of the yard holding an empty pitcher. I'd been refilling all afternoon, and I listened to her finish her speech. And I watched Brooke tear up again. And I watched my husband across the yard catch my eye with a look that said, I'm sorry, and also, I don't know what to do. And I just nodded. Slowly. The way you nod when you've already decided something but you're not ready to say it out loud yet. Nobody else said anything either. Not to my mother-in-law, not to me. A few of the guests thanked me directly as they were leaving. One woman, a friend of Brooke's I had never met, grabbed my arm and said this was the most beautiful shower she'd ever been to, who planned it. And before I could answer, my mother-in-law appeared at my shoulder and said with a smile, Oh, it all just came together, didn't it? Community effort. Community effort. I drove home that evening in silence. My husband tried to talk twice. I wasn't ready. Not because I was angry at him. Because I was doing something else. I was adding things up. The first baby shower I'd done for this family was for a cousin's wife, 3 years earlier. I had been dating my husband for 8 months. I wanted them to like me. I offered to help because I genuinely wanted to, and also because I was 26 and I still believed that effort was currency, and if I spent enough of it, I would eventually be rich and belonging. Then there was the Christmas party 2 years ago. I organized it because no one else stepped forward, and the silence when my mother-in-law mentioned it was the kind of silence that feels like a hand on your shoulder pushing down. I spent $412 of my own money on decorations and charcuterie supplies. I got it back in January after I asked twice. Then there was Brooke's engagement party. Then the rehearsal dinner coordination, which wasn't my job at all but somehow became my job. Then 3 holiday meals, where I showed up early and left late and washed dishes while other people sat in the living room. Then this. I thought about all of it on the drive home. Not angrily, quietly. The way you think about something you've been not thinking about for a long time and you finally let yourself look at it straight on. I had been useful. Extremely useful. And being useful had become so normal that my absence from a thank you speech didn't register as an oversight. It registered as the natural order of things. Helpers don't get thanked. Helpers just help. Here's what they didn't know. What I hadn't mentioned to anyone in that family. What I had kept quietly to myself for 6 weeks while I hot glued and coordinated and drove 40 minutes for ribbon was that I had been asked to speak at a regional event planning conference in the fall. Not just attend. Speak. A 40-minute keynote on invisible labor in the events industry, specifically the pattern of women whose professional expertise gets borrowed by their personal networks without credit, compensation, or acknowledgement. I had been building the talk for months. It was based on my own experience, among others. I had interviewed 14 women in similar situations. I had case studies. I had a slide that said, in large, clean font, "When you call it a community effort, whose community are you erasing?" I hadn't told my mother-in-law. I hadn't told Brooke. I had told my husband, who had listened and nodded and said that sounds really important, and then asked what was for dinner, which is a separate conversation we've since had. The conference was 8 weeks out. My speaker profile had gone live on their website 2 days before the shower. Name, photo, talk title, short bio. I hadn't shared it anywhere. I'd looked at it once, felt something quiet and full in my chest, and closed the tab. That night, after the shower, I sat in our kitchen while my husband made tea and I opened my laptop and I read the profile again. Hazel Monroe, event coordinator and speaker, talk, the thank you that never came, invisible labor, borrowed expertise, and the women who plan everything for free. I read it twice. I didn't send it to anyone. I didn't need to. On Tuesday, 4 days after the shower, my husband's aunt sent a message to the family group chat. She had apparently been scrolling the conference website looking for something unrelated, recognized my photo, and shared the link. Just a screenshot with a string of question mark emojis and then the eyes emoji, no other context. I was at work when it happened. I found out because my husband texted me a single line. I think they found the talk. I put my phone face down on my desk and finished the email I was writing. Then I picked it back up. The group chat had 17 messages in 20 minutes. Brooke's message came first. Wait, is this about US? My mother-in-law had sent a string of texts, not to the group, directly to me, Hazel. I just saw this. Can we talk? I'm not sure I understand what this is. Ben, are you saying we don't appreciate you? Then, I think this is a misunderstanding. Then after a pause, longer than the others, I don't know why you wouldn't just come to me if something was bothering you. I read them in order. Then I set my phone on my desk again and looked out the window at the parking lot for a moment. Come to her? I'd driven 40 minutes for ribbon. I'd spent $400 on a Christmas party and asked twice to be paid back. I'd been on the phone with her daughter-in-law at 11 p.m., talking through gender reveal logistics. I'd stood at the edge of her yard holding an empty pitcher while she gave a speech that mentioned 2 cousins who moved chairs. There's nothing to come to her with, not because I was too passive or too afraid. Because nothing I said in that yard, at that dinner table, in that family, had ever changed anything. The invisible don't become visible by asking louder. They become visible by stepping into the light on their own. I didn't respond to any of the messages that day. On Wednesday, I had a planning call with the conference organizers. On Thursday, I finalized my slide deck. On Friday, Brooke called me directly. I let it go to voicemail. She said, and I'm paraphrasing because I only listened to it once, "I just want to understand the talk. Like, is it about our family? Because that feels really personal. And I feel like if you had a problem, you could have just said something instead of making it into a whole public thing." A whole public thing. I had not named anyone. The talk had not been written about her shower. The talk had been written about 14 women over 3 years, including myself, because the pattern I experienced was not unique to me, and making it visible felt more useful than staying quiet about it. But I understood what she meant. She meant, "Why did you step out from behind the backdrop?" "My mother-in-law called Sunday." I answered that one. She asked if I was upset about the speech. I said I noticed I wasn't mentioned, yes. She said it wasn't intentional. It was a busy afternoon. There was a lot going on. I said I understood. She said she hoped I didn't feel like the family didn't value me. I said I appreciated her saying that. She said she just thought the talk might give people the wrong impression. I asked what impression she was worried about. There was a pause. Then she said that we're the kind of family that takes advantage of people. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "I think I'm gonna go. I'll talk to you soon." I didn't say she was wrong. I didn't say she was wrong. I didn't say she was right. I just got off the phone and sat in the quiet of my kitchen and thought about the word impression. The conference was in October. I gave the talk to 460 people in a hotel ballroom in Nashville. I wore a green dress I had bought 3 months before and kept hanging on the back of my closet door so I could see it every morning. I was nervous the way you're nervous when something matters. Not terrified, just awake. I talked for 42 minutes. I talked about the first time I realized that showing up was being confused with consenting. I talked about the difference between help that's offered and help that's assumed. I talked about the moment you understand that being reliable has made you invisible, and the much harder moment when you decide to stop making yourself small enough to fit in spaces that were never designed to hold you. I didn't talk about Brooke's shower specifically, but I did talk about a baby shower. I talked about standing at the edge of a yard with an empty pitcher and what it sounds like when a thank you speech erases you, and the very particular silence of a room full of people who watched it happen and said nothing. Someone in the third row was nodding before I even finished the sentence. After the talk, a woman came up to me in the hallway. She was maybe 50, professional, carrying a tote bag from a different conference 3 cities away. She said, "I've been in this industry for 22 years and no one has ever said that out loud in a room like this." She didn't hug me. She just looked at me for a moment like she needed to see that I was real. Then she shook my hand and walked away. That was the moment. Not the applause, though there was applause. That handshake in the hallway from a woman who'd been holding something unsaid for 22 years. My mother-in-law didn't reach out after the conference. Brooke sent a text 3 weeks later that said she hoped I was doing well and that the new nursery was almost finished. I replied with something warm and brief. We are not estranged. We are something else. Polite, careful, the way you are with people when you've stopped trying to be seen by them and started just maintaining the surface. My husband and I talked, really talked, for the first time in a long time, the week after Nashville. He said he was proud of me. He said he was sorry it had taken him so long to understand what was happening. He said he'd been so close to it he couldn't see the shape of it. I told him I wasn't angry at him. I told him I just needed him to see it now. He said he did. I think he meant it. In December, I started planning an event I'd been thinking about for almost a year. Not a corporate gig. Not a favor for anyone in that family. A gathering of 12 women from my industry, all of whom had, at some point, given their professional expertise away for free to people who loved them. We met on a Saturday evening at a wine bar I'd rented for 3 hours. I made a small welcome speech. I didn't hot glue anything. I just showed up in clothes I liked and said, "I think we all know why we're here." We went around the table. Everybody had a story. A sister's wedding they planned for nothing. A mother's retirement party they'd funded themselves. A friend's fundraiser gala they produced over 4 weekends, quietly, and then watched someone else take the podium. At one point, one of the women, a floral designer who had been in the industry for 8 years, said, "I used to think if I worked hard enough, they'd eventually just see me." And I said, "I know. I used to think that too. Nobody cried exactly, but the room got soft in a way that meant something. I took a photo at the end of the night, all 12 of us, wine glasses, low light, nobody performing anything for anyone. I posted it the next morning with a one-line caption, "To the women who plan everything and are finally planning for themselves." It got more engagement than anything I'd ever posted, but that's not the point. The point is, I didn't post it for anyone in that family. I didn't post it to be found or seen or discussed in a group chat. I posted it because it was true, and I wanted to say something true. A few weeks later, I got a follow-up email from the conference. They wanted me back next year. Expanded slot, 80 minutes, potentially a workshop component. I said yes before I finished reading the email. I'm not someone who stopped loving the people in that family. Love isn't really the thing that was ever missing. What was missing was basic acknowledgement, the kind that doesn't require an argument or a conference keynote to earn. The kind that should just be there. I spent years trying to earn it through effort, through usefulness, through showing up so consistently that I assumed eventually someone would look up from what I'd built and see me standing next to it. They looked up eventually, just not in the way I had imagined. Last spring, I drove past the venue where I'd organized my first event for that family years ago, the cousin's wife's baby shower where I wanted them to like me. I slowed down for a second at the light and looked at it. Just a building, just a parking lot, nothing remarkable. I drove on. There's a quote I wrote in my notebook somewhere during the months I was building the conference talk. I don't remember exactly when. It said, "You taught them you were furniture, now you have to teach them you're a person." It took longer than it should have, but I did it. Not loudly, not with a scene or a confrontation or a tearful ultimatum at a holiday dinner. I did it by finally putting my name on something and letting the world see it. The backdrop I'd hot glued at 2 a.m. came down after the shower. Nobody kept it, it went in the recycling bin. But the keynote is still on the conference website. Name, photo, talk title, Hazel Monroe. 42 minutes. 460 people. That one didn't go in the recycling bin. I used to think the hardest part was doing the work nobody asked for credit on, the 2 a.m. hot glue, the 40-minute drives for ribbon in exactly the right shade, the phone calls that ran almost 2 hours because someone else was anxious and I was available. I thought that was the hard part, the doing. But the hard part was actually the believing that if I just kept showing up, kept being reliable, kept being the one who handled things quietly and without complaint, eventually the people I loved would look up and see me standing there. Not the tasks, me. They didn't. Not for a long time. And that's not because they were cruel people. My mother-in-law isn't a villain. Brooke isn't someone I hate. What happened in that backyard, during that speech that went on for 4 minutes and found room for 2 cousins who moved chairs but not for me, wasn't the result of malice. It was the result of a pattern I had helped create. I had made myself so useful, so consistently present in the background that my presence stopped registering as something to acknowledge. I taught them I was furniture. And furniture doesn't get thanked, it just holds things. That's the part nobody talks about when they talk about invisible labor. It's not just that other people fail to see you. It's that over time you start to participate in your own erasure. You stay quiet because you don't want to seem like you need recognition. You keep doing the work because stopping feels like abandonment. You tell yourself it's fine, it's love, it's what family does. And you shrink yourself down a little more each time until the version of you that stands at the edge of the yard holding an empty pitcher barely takes up any space at all. What I know now is that character isn't built in the moments when people are watching. It's built in the years when they aren't. Every late night I spent on that talk, every interview I conducted with women who had been quietly carrying the same weight, every time I sat with my own story and decided it was worth telling honestly, that was me building something real, not for recognition. Because the truth of what I had lived deserved to be said out loud, in a room, by someone who had actually lived it. And intelligence, real intelligence, isn't just knowing your field. It's knowing yourself clearly enough to stop confusing effort with worthiness. I was smart enough to plan a flawless shower for 52 people. It took me longer to be smart enough to understand that my value was never conditional on how much I could produce for the people around me. Hazel Monroe didn't end up on that conference stage because she got angry. She ended up there because she got honest with herself first. about what she had been doing and why and what it was costing her. That kind of honesty is quiet and slow, and it doesn't look like much from the outside. But it changes everything from the inside. And when you finally stop performing for an audience that was never really watching, you find out there's a whole room of people who've been waiting for someone to say exactly what you have to say. The backdrop came down after the shower. My name on that conference website is still there.